Hezekiah, the 13th king of Judah, ascended to the throne during a period of significant spiritual and political turmoil, marked by idolatry and a departure from the ways of God, a legacy of his father, who is notoriously remembered for his abominable practices in the eyes of the Lord, 2 Chronicles 28. However, Hezekiah chose a different path, being one of the few kings of Judah who did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, just as his ancestor David had done, 2 Kings 18:3. From the outset of his reign, Hezekiah demonstrated a singular devotion to the Lord, implementing reforms aimed at purifying Judah of idolatry and restoring true worship to God. One of his first and most significant actions was the removal of the pagan altars, the cutting down of the Asherah poles, and the destruction of the bronze serpent, Nehushtan, which, although initially created as a symbol of healing by Moses, Numbers 21:8-9, had become an object of idolatry, 2 Kings 18:4. Hezekiah not only abolished idolatrous worship and restored the temple, but also re-established the celebration of Passover, a feast that had not been properly observed by many generations in Israel and Judah, 2 Chronicles 30. This act not only solidified his commitment to following divine precepts, but also sought to unite the people under the worship of the one true God, marking a return to spiritual roots and the covenant with God. Hezekiah's determination to lead his kingdom according to God's will and his reliance on the Lord in times of crisis established him as a model of faith and obedience. His story highlights the importance of godly leadership and the transformative impact a ruler committed to justice and true worship can have on a nation. By turning to God and moving away from the sinful practices inherited from his father, Hezekiah not only secured divine favor for himself, but also for the people of Judah, offering renewed hope and a pathway back to God's blessing and protection. During Hezekiah's reign, Judah faced significant external challenges and threats, marked chiefly by conflicts with the Philistines and the growing might of Assyria. The biblical narrative highlights these events, underlining the tension and complexity of the political and military relations of the time. Against the Philistines, Hezekiah adopted an offensive stance, reclaiming territories that had been lost during the reign of his father Ahaz. This effort not only strengthened Judah's borders, but also restored morale and national sovereignty. Hezekiah's success against the Philistines is mentioned in 2 Kings 18:8, where it states that he defeated the Philistines as far as Gaza and its territory, from watchtower to fortified city. The most significant threat, however, came from Assyria, an emerging superpower that sought to expand its territory by swallowing up neighboring kingdoms, including Israel and Judah. The siege of Samaria, the capital of the Kingdom of Israel, by the king of Assyria, culminated in the exile of Israel, a deeply traumatic event that symbolized the disintegration of the northern kingdom and served as a grim prelude to what could happen to Judah, 2 Kings 18:9-12. In the 4th year of King Hezekiah, which was the 7th year of Hoshea son of Elah king of Israel, Shalmaneser king of Assyria came up against Samaria and besieged it, and at the end of 3 years took it. Facing the growing Assyrian threat under Sennacherib, Hezekiah took measures to strengthen Judah's defenses, including reinforcing the walls of Jerusalem and constructing a tunnel to ensure a water supply during sieges, 2 Chronicles 32:2-5. However, recognizing the overwhelming power of Assyria, Hezekiah attempted to avoid direct confrontation through the payment of tribute, a decision reflecting Judah's difficult position as a small kingdom trying to navigate the turbulent waters of ancient Middle Eastern geopolitics. Hezekiah, king of Judah, sent to the king of Assyria at Lachish, saying, "I have done wrong. Withdraw from me, and whatever you impose on me, I will pay." The king of Assyria exacted from Hezekiah, king of Judah, 300 talents of silver and 30 talents of gold, 2 Kings 18:14. These events illustrate the delicate balance between resistance and diplomacy that Hezekiah had to maintain. In facing formidable enemies, he not only sought to protect his people through military and strategic means, but also turned to faith and prayer, recognizing God's sovereignty over human affairs. This period of intense external pressure tested Judah's resilience and Hezekiah's faith, shaping his legacy as a king who, despite challenging circumstances, maintained his trust in the Lord. Hezekiah's faith and prayer in the face of the Assyrian threat represent one of the narrative highlights of the Bible about unwavering trust in God in times of crisis. Faced with Sennacherib's relentless advance and his demand for surrender, Hezekiah finds himself in what seems to be a desperate situation. The king's response, however, transcends military and diplomatic strategies, revealing a deep reliance on divine providence. Hezekiah receives Sennacherib's letter, containing threats and blasphemies against God, and brings it to the temple, spreading it out before the Lord as a symbolic gesture of surrender and seeking divine intervention. This act of Hezekiah is described in 2 Kings 19:14-15, where he received the letter from the messengers and read it. Then he went up to the temple of the Lord and spread it out before the Lord. And Hezekiah prayed before the Lord. Hezekiah's prayer is not just a plea for help, it's an acknowledgement of God's sovereignty over all nations and a call for God to defend his name and his people from Assyrian arrogance. In his prayer, Hezekiah acknowledges the greatness of God. O Lord God of Israel, enthroned between the cherubim, you alone are God over all the kingdoms of the earth. You have made heaven and earth. 2 Kings 19:15. He lays out the situation before God, recognizing the Assyrians' ability to destroy nations and their gods, which are merely the work of human hands. However, Hezekiah makes a crucial distinction, appealing to the reality that the God of Israel is not like these idols. He is the creator of heaven and earth, capable of saving his people from the Assyrian threat. The climax of Hezekiah's prayer is a plea not just for Judah's salvation, but for the manifestation of God's glory before the nations. Now, Lord our God, deliver us from his hand, so that all the kingdoms of the earth may know that you alone, Lord, are God. 2 Kings 19:19. This request reflects Hezekiah's faith that divine intervention will serve as a testimony to God's sovereignty and power over all gods and nations. Hezekiah's prayer in the face of the Assyrian threat is a powerful reminder of the efficacy of faith and prayer in desperate situations. He did not resort to political alliances or human solutions. Instead, he turned to God in total dependence. The divine response to Hezekiah's prayer, through the prophet Isaiah, promises deliverance and protection, not just for Judah, but as an affirmation of God's power and faithfulness. Hezekiah's faith and his choice to seek God in a moment of profound crisis serve as an enduring example of trust in God above all human circumstances. The divine intervention in the desperate situation of Jerusalem under the siege of Sennacherib is one of the most powerful narratives in the Bible, demonstrating God's sovereign power over nations and his faithfulness to his promise to protect his people. God's response to Hezekiah's fervent prayer is mediated through Isaiah's prophecy, culminating in a miraculous victory that reaffirms divine sovereignty. God communicates his response through Isaiah, promising not only to protect Jerusalem, but also to strike a decisive blow against Assyrian arrogance. Isaiah 37:6. 7 says, Then Isaiah said to them, Tell your master, this is what the Lord says, Do not be afraid of what you have heard, those words with which the underlings of the king of Assyria have blasphemed me. Listen, when he hears a certain report, I will make him want to return to his own country, and there I will have him cut down with the sword. This prophecy not only assures Hezekiah that Jerusalem will be spared, but also that Sennacherib will meet his end far from Judah, marking the decline of Assyrian power. Beyond the promise of protection, God gives Hezekiah a sign that the city would not suffer from siege or famine. The sign given was that in the following year they would eat what grows of itself, and in the third year sow and reap, plant vineyards and eat their fruit. Isaiah 37:30. This sign was not just a promise of immediate deliverance, but also a guarantee of future restoration and the continued divine blessing on Judah. The most dramatic manifestation of God's power comes in the form of the miraculous annihilation of the Assyrian army. Then the angel of the Lord went out and put to death 185,000 in the Assyrian camp. When the people got up the next morning, there were all the dead bodies. Isaiah 37:36. This divine intervention not only saves Jerusalem from an imminent threat, but also serves as an indelible testimony to God's power, capable of altering the course of history and defeating mighty armies without a single arrow being fired by Judah. The miraculous defeat of the Assyrian army and the salvation of Jerusalem are pivotal moments that reinforce God's faithfulness to His promises and the efficacy of faith and prayer. The divine victory over Sennacherib not only ensures the physical survival of Jerusalem, but also reaffirms God's constant presence and protection over His people. This story of faith, prayer, and divine intervention continues to inspire generations, reminding us of God's supreme power over all adversities. The dramatic conclusion of the saga of Jerusalem's siege by Sennacherib and the subsequent divine intervention that saved the city does not end with the Assyrian withdrawal, but reaches an even more revealing denouement in the death of Sennacherib. This event not only seals the fate of the Assyrian king, but also serves as a powerful reminder of divine sovereignty and protection, which extend beyond the battlefield to the ultimate outcomes for those who defy God's will. Sennacherib, after the failure of his campaign against Jerusalem and the miraculous loss of his army, returns to Nineveh, the capital of his empire. The Bible recounts Sennacherib's end succinctly, yet loaded with significance. And it came to pass, as he was worshipping in the house of Nisroch his god, that Adramelech and Sharezer his sons smote him with the sword, and they escaped into the land of Ararat. And Esarhaddon his son reigned in his stead. Isaiah 37:38. Sennacherib's death at the hands of his own sons is not just a tragic irony, but also a testimony to divine justice, which can use even acts of human violence to fulfill its purposes. This final episode in the account of Sennacherib emphasizes God's faithfulness and continual protection over Jerusalem. The Assyrian king's death reiterates the message that no enemy, no matter how powerful, can prevail against God's people when He decides to protect them. More than a military victory, the salvation of Jerusalem and the defeat of Sennacherib symbolize the triumph of divine purpose over human ambitions and the preservation of God's covenant with His people. The final reflection on these events invites meditation on the nature of faith, the sovereignty of God, and the security found in His protection. The story of Hezekiah, Sennacherib, and the divine intervention in Jerusalem serves as a powerful reminder that amidst adversities and threats, trust in the Lord provides not only refuge, but also the promise of His justice and salvation. God's faithfulness is manifested not only in visible victories, but also in how He weaves the destinies of individuals and nations, ensuring that His will is fulfilled and His people are protected and guided according to His eternal purpose. The narrative of divine intervention in Hezekiah's life and the protection of Jerusalem against Assyrian forces leads us to a profound reflection on our own faith and the way we connect with God. Worship music, through the ages, has been a powerful means through which we express our faith, gratitude, and dependence on God. Encouraging a personal connection with God through music invites us to explore not just the depth of our faith, but also how we experience divine presence in our lives. The Bible is replete with examples that show the importance of music and singing as forms of praise and worship, which bring believers closer to God. In Ephesians 5:19, we are encouraged to speak to one another with psalms, hymns, and songs from the Spirit. Sing and make music from your heart to the Lord. This verse highlights music not just as an expression of communal faith, but also as an intimate practice of communion with God. Therefore, the reflective question we pose to listeners is, which worship song has brought you closer to God? This inquiry seeks not just to identify a specific song, but also to invite introspection on the moments when, through musical worship, we've felt the palpable presence of God, whether in times of joy or in moments of challenge and need. Each worship song carries within it a message, be it of hope, surrender, praise, or adoration. Like Hezekiah's prayer in the temple, a song can be a means to lay down our worries, fears, and joys before God, trusting in His sovereignty and love. Music has the power to transcend circumstances, uplifting our spirits and renewing our faith. We encourage reflection on how worship songs have been part of your spiritual journey. Which music resonates with your faith experience? How has this song helped to strengthen your connection with God, especially in times of difficulty or uncertainty? Sharing these experiences can serve as a testimony to the power of worship and God's faithfulness, inspiring others to seek a deeper relationship with the divine through music. When facing challenges or difficult situations, is there a biblical passage or story that you recall to find strength and hope? How has it helped you during tough times? What lesson from Hezekiah's story and the divine intervention against the Assyrians do you think can be applied to contemporary life and the challenges we face today? Did you enjoy this video? Subscribe to our channel where we post videos every other day. A big hug!